Welcome. Today's story will make you reflect on what is more important, family or love. The main character was ready to do anything for her man, but his choice destroyed their lives. What do you do when your reputation and future are at stake? You will hear a dramatic and touching story, full of betrayal, pain, and a choice that changed everything. Listen to the end. You are in for a surprising conclusion that might change your perception of love and loyalty. I never thought I would find myself in such a situation. At first, everything seemed perfect. 3 years ago, I met Jake, a confident, kind, and attentive man who seemed to be the embodiment of a dream. Our relationship developed quickly, and I could never have imagined that one day everything would fall apart. From the very beginning, I had to come to terms with the fact that Laura, Jake's older sister, was an integral part of his life. She was always there, too close. Jake often told me how they supported each other since childhood, how they went through tough times together, and I, naively believing in the power of family ties, tried to accept it. But very soon, I realized that Laura was a world of chaos that constantly interfered with our lives. She could show up at our house unexpectedly, even when I was hoping to spend a quiet evening alone with Jake. "Oh, I was just passing by," she would explain her intrusion with a light smile. It seemed that she didn't care about our plans or my desire for privacy. But I endured, trying to be polite. After all, this was Jake's family, and for his sake, I was willing to tolerate a lot. Over time, her small pranks began to pile up. Laura would borrow my things without permission: cosmetics, jewelry, even clothes. She would return everything, of course, but each time it bothered me more and more. However, the most annoying thing was that Jake always defended her. "She just wants you to like her," he would say whenever I brought up her brazen behavior. I turned a blind eye, convincing myself that everything would get better over time. But the most challenging moment came when Laura stayed with us for a week after yet another boyfriend kicked her out. She showed up late at night with a suitcase in hand, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I was forced to share our small space with someone who neither respected my things nor my comfort. These moments made me question things, but I kept holding on. I loved Jake and believed that I could come to terms with Laura. But the tension between me and his sister grew every day, and it seemed like a storm was brewing, ready to destroy everything we had built over the past 3 years. It happened at one of those parties Jake and I would throw for our friends. That evening, the atmosphere was light and carefree. I was running between the kitchen and the living room, trying to make sure all the guests were happy, while Jake laughed with his friends, clearly enjoying the night. Laura was there too, as always, and her presence was impossible to ignore. I tried to focus on my tasks, but something about her behavior made me feel uneasy. I had left my laptop on the living room table, a mistake I would soon deeply regret. It was my work tool, and it contained important documents related to a major project. I trusted my friends, but Laura, she was different. And as it turned out, my worries were not unfounded. When I returned from the kitchen, I noticed Laura sitting with my laptop on her lap. For a moment, I froze. What was she doing? Maybe just checking her email or something harmless. But something inside me told me that this situation was far more serious. As I got closer, I saw that she wasn't just browsing. She had opened one of the confidential files I had been working on for the past few weeks. The document contained sensitive information about a major project at my company. Any data breach could seriously damage my reputation. My heart began to race. "Laura, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to stay calm, though inside, I was boiling. She looked up and smirked. "Oh, relax, Liz. I was just checking out what you have here. You left your laptop open, so it's kind of your fault." I couldn't believe my ears. How could she be so irresponsible? But it got worse. Later, I found out that Laura didn't just snoop through my files. She had taken screenshots of some parts of the document and posted them on social media, with comments. Sarcastic, mocking comments that portrayed my work in a very negative light. My career could be seriously harmed by this. But Laura seemed pleased with herself, as if it were just a fun prank. When I demanded she delete the post, she merely waved it off. "If it was that important, why did you leave it out in the open?" she said with a smirk. "Liz, you take everything way too seriously. Relax, no one even noticed." But I knew that wasn't true. Several colleagues had already messaged me, asking what was going on. I felt the ground slipping from under my feet. This wasn't just a mistake or a dumb joke, It was a blow to my reputation, and Laura didn't even care. I had to threaten to report her post to the platform before she reluctantly agreed to delete it. But the damage was done. I realized this wasn't just a one-time incident. Laura had crossed a line, and I couldn't just ignore it. After Laura deleted the post, I felt like it wasn't enough. My career was at risk, and I expected Jake to support me in this situation. This wasn't just a petty argument, it was a real threat to my future. Inside, I was filled with resentment, and I knew we needed to talk. I understood that if we didn't resolve this now, it would become a permanent scar in our relationship. That evening, when the guests had left and the apartment was quiet again, I sat down across from Jake. He looked at me, sensing that something was wrong but didn't take the initiative to speak. "Jake, we need to talk," I said, trying to hold back my emotions. He glanced away, as if already predicting what this conversation would be about. "Is this about Laura?" he asked, as if already justifying her actions. "Yes, Jake, it's about Laura. Do you understand that she crossed every boundary?" My voice trembled slightly, but I pressed on. "She invaded my personal space, tampered with my work, and nearly destroyed my career. And you're just sitting there like it's no big deal." He sighed and rubbed his face with his hands. "Liz, I know she messed up," he began slowly. "But it's Laura. She didn't mean any harm, she's just like that. You know her. You knew when we started dating that she was a part of my life." "Part of your life?" I repeated bitterly. "But do you realize that she's ruining mine? She took my personal files, posted them for everyone to see, and didn't even apologize. And you just sit here defending her like it's okay." "I'm not defending her," he weakly tried to argue. "I'm just trying to understand why you're making such a big deal out of this." She deleted the post. "Why keep dragging this out?" Those words hit me harder than I expected. There was no support, no understanding of what I was going through. To him, it was just a post, just one of Laura's mistakes. But to me, it was betrayal. "Are you serious?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Do you really think this is just drama? This is my job, Jake. My reputation. Don't you understand that things like this can ruin my career?" Jake sighed, as if he was tired of talking about this. "Liz, she's your family now too. And in families, you forgive. Yes, she messed up, but you have to learn to let things go. Isn't that what family does?" Those words finally broke me. "Forgive?" I echoed. "I'm supposed to forgive someone who didn't even apologize? Who's tearing apart everything I've worked for? And you're telling me I need to let it go just to avoid family conflict?" Jake looked tired and slightly irritated. There was something in his eyes that told me he wasn't going to change his mind. He had chosen Laura's side. Maybe without even realizing it, but he had. For him, it was more important not to upset his sister than to support me during such a difficult time. "Liz, let's just drop it," he finally said, rubbing his temples. "This is too much. Laura's my sister, and I don't want to cause more tension. Family is family. And if you love me, you should learn to understand that too." At that moment, I realized that a gap had formed between us that couldn't just be closed with words. He didn't see the problem, didn't understand that this was more than just his sister's mistake. For me, it was about respect, about the support I so desperately needed. But Jake chose a different path, a path where there was no room for me. That night, I went to bed alone, feeling betrayed. I realized that I could no longer ignore this conflict. After that night, it became crystal clear to me, I was alone in this fight. Jake wasn't going to take my side, no matter how much I needed his support. He was willing to overlook Laura's actions just to avoid awkward conversations with his family, and that hurt me deeply. The next few days passed in silence. We barely spoke. Jake either left for work early or stayed late with friends, trying to avoid uncomfortable topics. And I felt the growing sense of injustice and resentment inside me. I wanted him to realize on his own how much his words and actions had hurt me, but each day only brought more disappointment. Inside, a struggle was brewing. I tried to figure things out. Was I asking for too much? Was the problem really with me, not with Laura? But no matter how much I turned it over in my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was right. Respect and support are the foundation of any relationship. And if the person you're building a future with isn't willing to stand up for you, what's left? One evening, when Jake came home from work, I decided I couldn't stay silent any longer. We needed to clear the air before it was too late. "Jake, we can't keep ignoring this," I began, trying not to raise my voice. "You understand that this isn't just about Laura. This is a problem in our relationship. I feel betrayed. I need your support, and you're just defending her like I have no right to be upset." He sighed heavily and sat down on the couch, clearly not ready for this conversation. "Liz, I've already said everything. I don't want to go over this again. Laura's my sister, and yes, she was wrong, but is this really worth ruining our relationship over? Is it worth ignoring my feelings?" I countered, feeling the anger rising inside me. "You always said you loved me, that we were partners. But right now, I don't feel like your partner. I feel like you've chosen her." "That's not true," he tried to argue, but his voice lacked conviction. I don't want to hurt my family. In the end, family is forever." Those words were the final straw. Family. For him, the concept of family meant more than I did, but not in the way I understood it. For me, family meant people who support you during tough times, who protect you, who are there for you when things are hard. But for Jake, family was something else, an unquestionable truth that couldn't be challenged, even when one of its members behaved inappropriately. "And what am I to you?" I asked, feeling tears well up in my eyes, though I fought to hold them back. "Am I your family too, Jake? Or am I just someone who doesn't have the right to your support?" He was silent. That moment of silence was so deafening that in it, I heard everything I needed to know. He wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to choose me, even when I needed him most. I realized that for him, the comfort of his family was more important than our relationship. Finally, Jake looked at me with some kind of confusion, as if he didn't fully understand what I was trying to say. "Liz, you have to understand. Laura has always been a little difficult, but she's trying. And I just want you to be more patient with her. She didn't mean any harm." "Do you really think that?" I asked, holding back tears. "Do you really believe this was just an accident? She invaded my personal life, mocked my work, and you're still making excuses for her." He started talking about forgiveness again, about how families stick together. But for me, they were just empty words. His refusal to stand up for me, his constant attempts to smooth over the conflict without acknowledging my feelings, was tearing me apart inside. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and suddenly realized I no longer felt safe around Jake. I could no longer ignore the truth. If he wasn't willing to defend me in this situation, what would happen next? The day came when I couldn't take it anymore. The silence between Jake and me grew louder, and every conversation ended with the same brick wall of misunderstanding. He continued to act like nothing was wrong, as if my feelings were just a temporary weakness that I would soon overcome. But each day, my heart grew heavier. I began to notice how Jake was avoiding me. His phone conversations with Laura became more frequent, and whenever I tried to talk, he would brush me off like an annoying fly. I could see the irritation in his eyes every time I brought up the document incident. He had become distant, and this coldness between us was weighing on me more and more. One evening, when Jake came home, I decided it was time to put an end to this. We couldn't go on like this. It was unbearable. I gathered all my thoughts, emotions, fears, and resentments and decided that this conversation would be the last. "Jake, we need to have a serious talk," I began, trying to keep calm even though I was already boiling inside. As usual, he looked tired and slightly annoyed. It seemed like this topic had worn him out more than it had me. "Liz, you know I don't want to go over this again." His voice was dry, almost cold. But I couldn't hold back anymore. "This isn't a discussion, Jake. This is the end," I said quietly but confidently, looking him straight in the eyes. He looked at me in disbelief, as if he didn't fully understand what I meant. "What? You're going to leave me over this? Over Laura? Over that stupid post?" His voice trembled with anger, and his eyes flared with resentment. "It's not just a post," I replied firmly but calmly. "It's your reaction to everything that happened. You never stood up for me. You made excuses for Laura when she invaded my personal space, when she undermined my career. You chose her, Jake. You chose your family over me." "Yes, I chose my family because they matter more," he shouted, abruptly standing up from the couch. "Liz, it's just a job, it's just a document. You seriously want to destroy our relationship over something so trivial?" Those words cut deeper than I expected. To him it was just a job, but to me it was everything. Not just a document, not just a project. It was my future, my reputation, everything I had worked for. And he couldn't or wouldn't understand that. "You don't understand, Jake," I whispered, feeling tears roll down my cheeks. "It's not trivial. It's about respect. You don't respect me, you don't respect my feelings. You defend her, even when she's clearly in the wrong. I can't live with that anymore." He froze for a moment, then his face twisted in anger. "So that's it? You're choosing your career over our relationship? Your pride matters more than love?" His words were full of venom. "And your family matters more than me?" I replied, my voice full of pain, finally letting out all the emotions that had been building up inside me for weeks. We stood in silence, staring at each other like two strangers. Jake seemed at a loss for what to say. His face was frozen in confusion, and at that moment, I realized he would never understand. I took a deep breath, wiping away the tears. "I'm leaving, Jake," I said quietly, as if placing the final period in our conversation. "I can't be with someone who isn't willing to support me when it matters." He just stood there in silence. Maybe deep down, he knew it was the end too, and that this wasn't just about Laura, it was about something much bigger. It was about my right to be heard and respected. But Jake wasn't going to change. I grabbed my bag, silently walked out the door, and didn't look back. At that moment, I felt a heavy but undeniable sense of liberation. I left, leaving behind everything that had seemed so important in our life together. Jake stayed in that apartment, with its silence and his thoughts. I thought that once I walked out the door, I would feel relief, but instead, I felt emptiness. My heart ached, as if something important inside me had broken. I walked down the empty streets, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts, about how we had started this relationship, how wonderful everything had been, and how quickly it all fell apart when the time came to make a choice. At first, it was hard. The loneliness I hadn't felt in so long consumed me entirely. I tried to distract myself with work, but I kept coming back to thoughts of Jake. Again and again, our last conversation replayed in my head, his words about family, about how I had chosen my career over love. It echoed inside me, making me question every step I had taken. Maybe I was too harsh? Maybe I should have been more patient? But every time I thought that, Laura's face and her smirk as she watched her actions destroy my work flashed before my eyes. Weeks passed, and a new wave hit me. Jake started telling everyone about our breakup, painting me as someone who chose work and pride over love. His family began calling and texting, accusing me of ruining everything over some trivial matter. Laura, of course, never felt an ounce of guilt. She went on with her life, unaware that her actions had been the final straw in a relationship I once thought would last forever. One day, after another exhausting day at work, I got a message from Jake. Just a few words. "I can't believe you did this. You could have handled this differently." Those words hit me harder than I expected. He still didn't understand why I left. In his mind, it was all so simple. I could have just ignored it, forgiven his sister, and moved on. But for me, that was impossible. I couldn't stay in a relationship where my feelings were less important than someone else's mistakes. I didn't reply to his message. Instead, I sat in my chair by the window and stared out at the darkening sky for a long time. I realized that I couldn't keep looking for excuses. I had made my choice, and it was the right one. But why did it still hurt so much? Months passed, and I began to recover. Work once again became the central focus of my life, and I regained the respect of my colleagues and the trust that I had almost lost because of Laura's actions. But the wound left by this breakup still ached. I tried to rebuild my life, but every time I thought about Jake, the pain returned. One day, I accidentally stumbled upon an old photograph of Jake and me laughing on the beach during one of our trips. I stared at the picture for a long time, and in that moment, I was overwhelmed with memories. We had been so happy then. But something in our relationship had been wrong from the start. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Laura had always been his priority, and I knew it. But I had hoped that love could change everything. The photo, like a symbol of the past, reminded me of how important it is to let go in time. Sometimes people come into our lives to teach us something important, and then they leave. Jake was that person for me. He taught me to stand up for myself, for my boundaries, and my dignity. And though the lesson was painful, I realized that I had to go through it to become stronger. Tears slowly began to roll down my cheeks, but they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of farewell. A farewell to the person I once loved. A farewell to the dreams of what our life could have been. I wiped away the tears, took a deep breath, and put the photograph away in a drawer. At that moment, I realized that I was moving on. Not immediately, not in one day, but step by step, I was rebuilding myself. Yes, it hurt, but that pain became a reminder that I deserved more. I deserved a relationship where I would be respected and supported. And though I would never forget Jake, I knew one thing: now I was on the right path. The path to myself. Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Your opinion is important to me. Share your impressions in the comments. It's truly valuable to me as an author. What would you have done in the heroine's place? Was her choice the right one? And remember, your comments help make our channel better. Subscribe and don't miss new stories that will leave a mark on your heart.